here I was at 18 years old. I was pregnant. I was married. I didn't finish high school. And if you look at what I did and where I've been in my life and the experiences I have, I'm like, who could have ever guessed in a million years, right? Welcome to The Way of the Muse, a podcast for women who want to create richness in every area of their lives, from business and career to lifestyle, relationships, family, purpose, and fulfillment. I'm Gigi Sage.
And I'm Makena Sage. We're a mother-daughter coaching team, and combined, we've spent over 4 decades helping people create their best and most fully expressed lives. If you're ready to step into your bigger dreams with ease, fun, and flow, you're in the right place. Let's get into the episode.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. Good morning,
We're back
Makena.
together.
Yeah. Together,
You're
but
like,
not really together. So we're
not yet. We will be in a couple days, though.
And that's right. We're going to be in New York City. I'm super excited. I haven't been there in years.
I know. We lived there for a while when I was young, and we're going to lead a retreat for our platinum clients. It's going to be so fun. It's going to be cold, but thankfully it seems like we're escaping some of those polar vortexes that have been going on, and weather's going to be a little better while we're there. So
but looking very forward to it. We get to go to the theater and nice meals, so super excited.
It'll be fun. A few days in the city.
Yeah.
And today we have an episode on women being hard on themselves.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners can relate to that. Yeah, I know I can relate to it, actually.
And there's even like sneaky, subtle ways that this shows up, right? Even when women think they're not hard on themselves, we find that often when we dig a little deeper, there are subtle ways in which they are.
Yeah. I recently was on with a client, and she was telling me how positive she is all the time. And it's true. If you talk with her, she's just like super positive, sees the bright side of everything. But when we started talking and going a little deeper, what she realized is she was positive in all the outward things and super positive about other people and things that were going on. But inwardly, she was hard on herself like all the time. And, I'd seen that. I could see it. And so it was a big aha for her because she had this kind of subtle conversation going in the background about, just being hard on herself. But then she works it on the outside to be so, if you met her, vivacious and very, very, very open and positive.
Yeah, this is such a powerful distinction because when you really get this and you can really shift to not being so hard on yourself or to being kinder to yourself, it really has, I think, just a huge ripple effect on your life, right? And your business, your results, your career, whatever that might be.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think just going off of what you just shared, you said, she was really positive in her life, but maybe not so much with herself. So that's a good kind of self-reflection question for our listeners is, where are the places, are there places where maybe you aren't as kind to yourself or positive with yourself, or you do tend to get a little hard on yourself? And I'm curious, Gigi, what do you see about why people and women especially seem to have such a hard time acknowledging ourselves?
Well, I think one thing is, it's modeled to us, as our parents. I mean, you probably got some of that from me. And
we won't talk about that on the podcast.
And that's, that's the great thing about, the younger generation, and you get to learn from your parents, And so I think, it's modeled to you. And I think especially that's changing in the world, I think, a bit. But you're also, we're told not to boast, and to be humble. Like, you shouldn't talk too much about yourself, and I always think that's funny because I work in Europe a lot. And through my years of working in there, And often with the Germans is I'll talk great about my kids, and I'll really, talk great about them and how much I admire them and what they're doing. And I saw for years people were super uncomfortable with that. And they absolutely could not do that about their own children. And now I've watched, especially clients that I've had for many years, now they do that. There's a big change to it because before it felt like you just don't do that. That's taboo. And
Interesting.
the other one is, is when we don't share, it ends up biting us in the butt. This is a huge mental culture shift for women, is really owning our value. The more we've gone into business and the more we are, a lot of times the breadwinners, and we're out there really going for it. And, I talk about this. Some of the most successful women I know still have this in the back of their mind. It's a tape that's running for them. And even with your men, I always tell women, you got to go, hey, you're right, honey, I'm hot stuff. Okay. Because a man loves it when he knows that that you're hot stuff. That confidence that's one of the most attractive things about women, for men.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially if your man loves into you, and really tells you those things, it's like, don't just deflect, really take it in. And over time, let it shift your perspective. That happened with me and Sonny, where over the years, the way he would talk to me and, admire me really shifted my view of myself. And I can own my beauty in a way that I couldn't before. And he loves that. It makes him so happy, when I talk positively about myself instead of just being hard on myself. And, the other side of this, you kind of touched on this, but there's this aspect that I think can become a little bit of false humility too, right? So, I see this sometimes with people because it's been so maybe programmed in, or they've just seen it modeled to them, that it's sort of like, oh, no, right? Yeah. What do you see with false humility?
Yeah, with false humility, it's a way of always downplaying your accomplishments or abilities. And in some ways, while really feeling kind of secret superior, what happens is we constantly put ourselves down, or we say, I'm not as good as you think I really am. And so, like you said, it is a form of deflecting, and it doesn't really let things in. So, and so in that, it doesn't make you really own again your value. Like you said, you have transformed that over the years, and really look into the things that you are doing that are really great, or you are beautiful. And that doesn't mean you're more beautiful than someone else. Is that we all have a certain kind of beauty. And when we own what we're good at and we own what we do, there's something hugely authentic about that. And there's something where people trust it too.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's like the false humility is kind of like, is it truly authentic, right? Someone might feel insecure or something. Okay. Then that's one kind of energy. But if someone is just kind of saying, oh, no, or I'm not that great or whatever. And sometimes there's just like an interesting stop in the energy that happens there. If it's not really fully authentic, like, you say, what's owning your value, not around beauty. It would be like, oh, like, you're really brilliant at that. Somebody tells you something like that and you go, oh, no, like there's so many smarter people or whatever. Yeah. And it just sort of puts an interesting kink in the energy. Like if you've ever acknowledged someone like that or given them a really authentic compliment of something you just really see and recognize, and then they're kind of like deflect, it's a strange dynamic, right? It feels weird to be on the giving side of that. So that's kind of what we're talking about with false humility, is like when someone does that to you or for you or shares something, it's really taking it in and being like, Thank you. It's as simple as thank you. Those two little words.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. Or thank you for noticing that. I love that. When people sometimes tell me things like that, I'm just like, thank you so much. And it really means a lot that they said that. to me because a lot of times people don't say it. So verbalizing is very powerful and it makes me feel good. It makes me remember, oh yeah, I do that, or oh yeah, I'm good at that.
Yeah. And it's not that you're better, right? Doesn't just because
Right.
somebody's saying something great about you doesn't mean they think you're better than them or better than somebody else. It's just an in the moment truth. It's
Yeah.
something they see or they observe. I love to say, so I say thank you. And then I often also say, that's so kind, or you're so
Yeah.
kind, because I really feel that from someone if they've taken the time out to verbalize something. I was with some girlfriends yesterday. We were talking about our skin, and they said something about my skin being so beautiful naturally or something. And I was like, wow, that's really kind. And it's not something I actually really think about for myself. So in that moment, it was
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, instead of deflecting, I went like, huh, maybe that is true. Let me look at my skin a little differently from now on,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so that's a little bit with the false humility.
Yeah. And, when you stop that or you're not doing it, if I tell you you're an incredible mother and then you say, oh, yeah, but, I've made this mistake or that mistake. And then again, it takes it away, but there's something that person is seeing in you. And this is where when we embrace it, this is also the way to fill the bank of stop being hard on yourself. Because, I often do that is from the things that people tell me. If I get down on myself, then I'll remember, no, this, and this, because it's that outside um, validation, which is so much more powerful than me figuring it out myself or me thinking about myself.
Yeah, it's like seeing yourself through someone else's
It's his
eyes, kind
eyes,
of
right on. Yeah.
leasing their viewpoint for a little while and just
Mm-hmm.
going like, what is it they're seeing? Getting curious instead of sort of just going to your own habitual thought patterns of maybe where you think you're not measuring up.
Mm-hmm.
And go ahead.
Yeah. And then, using this in a way, when we talked about not boasting, there's like for me, when I am talking to somebody and maybe they want to work with me or they're curious about it, and I will often say, listen, if you work with me, I'll change your life. And I don't mean I'll do it, they're going to change their life, but I support you in such a way, things are going to change if you do the work, right? I can't make you do the work. And I'm very confident about that. And over the years, I shared that with our coaches that we trained, because when I do that, the reason I do it is because I so believe that, and I believe in the person. And in that confidence, that allows the person to know my commitment. So some people may say that's boasting. For me, that's my willfulness and my determination in what I do in my work.
Yeah, and that holds an energy, that holds frequency
Yeah.
that people can align to when they are working with you, like you're saying, of your belief in them and your clarity that their life is absolutely going to change. So when they go
Yeah.
through their ups and downs and their doubts and whatever, you hold that line. That's part of what a great coach does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I want to talk a little bit about this idea, because some people might be coming up against this in themselves as they're listening, around, well, isn't that egotistical, or
Mm-hmm.
like we said, boasting or standing out? And I really love the topic of the ego, because people have sort of demonized this word and also made it mean something very specific in the English language, which I don't know in other languages. But in English, ego we've come to equate with boasting or with
Mm-hmm.
trying to be the center of attention. It's like, oh, they just have a big ego. And it's kind of like they want all the attention for themselves. But the truth is, in my experience, and you and I have talked about this, is that the ego is actually in our work with people, the ego is kind of, some people call it like the small self. It's more like the mind, or it's the personality. And the ego is actually the part for many people that has them play small. It's the kind of the
Mm-hmm.
voice in the head that's saying, oh, well, don't do that because whatever, whatever. Now, for some portion of the population, they take kind of the voice in the head and their insecurities and they act bigger. and they do kind of pull the attention. And we've taken that small portion of the population and said that's what ego is.
Mm-hmm.
But the truth is, for I think the majority of people, it's often the opposite, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen
Mm-hmm.
that?
Yeah, and I just heard something about really ego is self-centeredness, and self-centeredness comes, I mean, when you have fear, that's actually self-centeredness. Because it's about you, basically, right?
Your attention's on yourself, like
your
you always
attention's
told
on
me.
yourself, yeah. So, which is what I've taught for years, is when you say, "Oh, I'm not good enough," or "I can't get out there and go do that," I say, that is the attention on yourself. The truth is, you can not do it, because the value it creates in the world. That's when you step out of that self-centered ego. Instead of doubting yourself and being in fear, you go into service, into, what you are meant to do on this planet, and no matter if that's big or small, or what somebody would consider big or small, no matter what that is, it's that stepping into what your purpose and soul is here to do.
And that's the language I like to use around it. Is I use the verbiage of the ego and then the soul. So the ego being, again, the mind, the small self, kind of the thoughts that run through our head. And then the soul being this deeper part of ourselves that's here, whatever you believe about that. But, if you have some sort of feeling that we're here for a bigger reason or came to this planet to do something, then that soul is that deeper part that knows what you're here to do, or, is here to, like you said, be of service. And so when people really can step out of the small self that actually wants them to play small, the ego for many people, and really own their value, like we're talking about today. The ego is the part that's hard on you. The ego is the part that's hard on you. The soul is not hard on you. The soul knows this is who I am, and it's not better or worse than anybody else, but it is a gift. And so when you can tap into that part of yourself and really own your value, or sometimes that means stepping out in the world in some way and shining, or, doing some work that helps others, or whatever, contributing in some way, you can feel when that's like aligned with the truth of your soul. And that's coming from such a different place than the ego. So I just wanted to uncouple the word ego from what most people think of it as, and really kind of give people this framework of, is this my ego or is this my soul? And recognizing that sometimes the ego is actually the part that's being hard on yourself or making you play small.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So there's another reason that women are hard on themselves that we wanted to talk about. Can you share a little bit about that one, Gigi?
Yeah, because in our culture, especially the Western culture, we focus so much on achievement, winning, we got to win. So we're always looking at how far we have to go to get to our goal, So here I am now, but oh my God, my goal is this. Ugh, I didn't make it. So then, I'm not a good person, or I don't do what I say. And what happens is we rarely stop and really slow down and celebrate our successes. I mean, really celebrate them, really take a moment. And, I always say, I'm like, oh, Gigi did a great job. That's how I celebrate and talk to myself, and to really take that moment. We see so much with, because again, often the way you were raised. Again, when I started working in Germany and I was teaching the skill of acknowledgement, and this is back in the early 90s, and even late 80, 89, I was there, and they were just offended. They were like, no, we don't do that. We don't acknowledge other people. We don't do that. That again, that's taboo here. And, it took years in my work there, and even when my books came out, and the culture shifted, and not just because of me, because the culture over time. But I was a huge influence in that in Europe, because it was a shift in starting to look at their good accomplishments and what they were doing, and also to but acknowledge the people in their lives and let them know, how they feel and how they contribute. And so for us, that is something that we see in a lot of our work with women, but also with men. I have it often. Is it feels uncomfortable to stop and really celebrate what you've done or how far you've come, or all of these things that you're doing. People don't want to go there because, again, it feels like it's egotistical or something.
Yeah, and it's also just the way, again, in our culture, we've been taught, and in many cultures, this is true.
Mm-hmm.
I remember a few years ago in one of the masterminds I was a part of, they talked about this concept, which is actually from a book called The Gap and the Gain. And the book is by Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy. And I didn't actually read the book, but we did a pretty extensive training on it. And it was such a fascinating concept to me. You can Google it or you can go get the book. And essentially, I'm going to paraphrase, it's like there's, imagine sort of, a piece of paper or something, and you're drawing a line on that piece of paper to get from here where you are to here, the goal, right? X marks the goal. And so what happens is there's this gap between where you are and where you want to be. And this is what most of us focus on. We're always focusing on the gap between where we are and where we want to be. But what's interesting is that over time, as we're moving forward, we make progress. So we actually move up on that piece of paper closer to that X. Mm-hmm. But the interesting thing is that most people are still only focused on the gap. Nobody looks back at what they call the gain. And the other interesting thing is that the target moves for most people. So after a little while, they're like getting closer, or maybe they even hit the goal. They take 2 seconds to be excited about it. And then they move the goalpost out another distance into the future, into the distance. And so in that, there's this thing, like you're saying, of always looking at where we want to go, the next thing we want to accomplish, how far we have to go, and never stopping, rarely stopping to look back and go, oh my gosh, look at this gain. Look how far I've come. And that's really, from what I understand, kind of the point of this idea is to have high achievers or anyone really take the time to go, wow. I love that thing that sometimes you see floating around on social media of like, in what ways are you living the life that your younger self dreamed about?
No kidding. Yeah.
Wow, the things that we get to have or do. And if you're in a down point, maybe that's not true. It doesn't feel true in this very moment. But really, if you look over the course of your life, for most people, or even you've had experiences that your younger self would have been like, oh my gosh, that's what I want. So that is the gain. That's the part to really celebrate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that is true. Like I was saying with the acknowledgement piece, to stop and really acknowledge yourself too, to acknowledge your successes and really appreciate them. And there's one more, and I love this one. It's so simple. You've all heard it. And it's the glass half full mentality. And, sometimes when I can't get through, a lot of times to leaders, this simple, sharing this, everybody gets that. Oh, okay. I understand how that works, because we do this, like the glass is half full. We're so used to getting together and talking about, this isn't going well, instead of getting together and going, this is going fantastic. Because again, every day we have, moments we wake up and so many great things happen. And then one bad thing happens. And then you ask someone how their day was, and they go immediately to what didn't work. And they forget about all the wonderful things that happened earlier. And this is just the human mind. This is the human experience. We constantly look, and we're trained even in school to look at, that whole critical thinking, right? The critical thoughts of things, instead of looking at what's working in our lives, what's going really well. And if someone else shares that way, how does that make you feel? You might even feel kind of like, oh, well, they think they're really great or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think we called it the glass half full, but I think it's actually the glass half empty, right? Because the glass is half full. No, it was on our outline. So there you go. But it is kind of the glass half empty mentality, instead of going, oh, it's actually half full. Again, sort of like the gap and the gain. And in what ways is it full? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I love
Mm-hmm.
what you're saying about when we get together with other people, and we chit chat about what's not working. And sometimes it's like, that's a habit.
Yeah.
And if you really pay attention and you go, I don't want to do that anymore, I want to really focus on what's working instead of what's not working. Sometimes it's like stark when you start getting together with friends or something like that. And you're like, oh
Mm-hmm.
my gosh, I don't know what to talk about, or everybody's only talking about their problems. And
Yeah. Yeah.
it can be an interesting awareness to have.
But the other thing, just to say there, and one reason we do share maybe what's not going well is maybe there's a deeper conversation that happens sometimes, because I know in my work, if I just talked about what was going well, that wouldn't get to the deeper things that people are going through. So I think it's not so much of all the time about what's not going well, but maybe just where people maybe are having challenges and things like
Mm.
that. But what you're talking about is that thing of where people get together and they complain. And in the complaining, there's not really, we don't go any deeper than that. It's just a complaint.
Yeah, it's kind of like a question could be, am I just complaining to complain?
Yeah.
Or am I sharing vulnerably to
Yeah.
really connect, or to go deeper with someone, or to work something out? That's a different kind of feeling or intention behind it
Yeah.
versus just kind of chit-chatting about our problems.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. Yeah, and you talked a lot about Europe, but there's also, I know in Australia, there's something called tall poppy syndrome. And I haven't been to Australia myself, but I've heard a lot about this from friends of mine who are Australian. And it's kind of this idea of, if you stand out, right? If that poppy grows taller than the other poppies, then they'll kind of cut you down, right? And that's culturally so in their culture that it really comes up for people from Australia when they're thinking about going out, becoming successful, celebrating wins, those kinds of things.
Yeah, that is, very much. I've been with a lot of Australians, and that is something they do. The first time I experienced it, it was at a dinner in Singapore, and I remember I was in shock. I could not believe the way they talk to each other.
Mm.
Now, for them, it's like they're just like, that's what we do, that again, that's cultural, that's funny, it's
Kind of a
fun.
self-deprecating.
Yeah, yeah. But I have seen through the years and speaking to people from Australia that, like you said, a lot of times underneath, it really holds some people back too.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about how you can shift this, right? We've kind of sprinkled some ideas throughout the episode today, but if someone does feel like, oh, I see ways in which I'm being hard on myself, or not really acknowledging how far I've come, what's something they can do to start to shift in the other direction?
First of all, just sit back and, take stock of, look at who you are and what you've accomplished in your world. And as you said, Makena, look back at your younger self and where you came from and where you are today. And you can even take some time and journal about that, and another way, a beautiful way of doing this, we do sometime in our retreats, is if you look at your life as someone else from the outside looking in, what would you see? Who is that person? Or if you look and you go, if there's a movie about you and you watch yourself day to day through this movie and what you do and where you have impact, and the little things that you do to serve other people, the little things that you do that make a difference. And you look at that, and then you see, oh my gosh, this person's such a hero in the movie. And that is just a great way to start practicing. And I think that's a great mental exercise when you want to get down on yourself. Like I said, for myself, I'm always, when I look at my life, and it's been a lot of life, right? And because I'm older, but I look at, here I was at 18 years old. I was pregnant. I was married. I didn't finish high school. And if you look at what I did and where I've been in my life and the experiences I have, I'm like, who could have ever guessed in a million years, right? And this I love to share with younger people too, is there is this wide open world for you, and just because whatever you're going through right now and wherever you sit in your life, whoever you are, older people, that is, there's, look at where you've been and where you are now. And even if you're in a down place, look back and see how far you've come, and look that there's so much opportunity for you out there. And then
you often say, like, if someone's looking from the outside, like maybe it's your best friend, like somebody that really loves you, what would they say if they were kind of writing that story or talking about what your life has been? So really looking through the lens of love, because I think people, even when they try to look from the outside, could still get hard on themselves. But really looking through the lens of someone who really loves you and admires you and thinks you're just amazing.
Yeah. And through the lens of love is, the hard times and the times you made mistakes, all of those things, that's part of the human experience. And that person looking from the outside would see that as, wow, look at you. Look how you conquered that, or look how you got through that. Yeah. Yeah. Just a couple examples of that is a woman I know that is, has a beautiful life, an amazing life, done so much. And, I often see this with like stay-at-home moms, they decide to give up their career, stay home with their children, and really support their partner in his career and his business, and handle everything, and then also be supportive in his believer, and then really grow their children. And through that, sometimes if they're in a setting where there's business women or whatever, it can feel uncomfortable because they're not actively out there in the world doing these kind of things. And to stop in that kind of situation, like with this woman, and I even pointed out to her, is that she has an amazing life, what she's built, and 40 years of marriage, amazing children. She's created a space for herself that is beautiful, and just so many things she does in her life that that are incredible,
Yeah. It was reminding me, I just saw this reel. I sent it to my husband because we're expecting right now. And so all the baby reels are showing up, of course. And I'll just read it to you. It says, "Me, today was so unproductive. It's hard with the baby. I got nothing done. The house is a mess and all I did was hold him. My baby. I had the best day with mommy. She held me. We napped together. She made sure my belly was full and my diapers were always changed. When I cried for her, she was always right there to pick me up. I love her so much." And that's just such a sweet, that's again, through the eyes of love, and, where people do get hard on themselves. And this is, of course, we're talking about babies there, but like you're saying, women who have maybe stayed home and raised families. And often they're going, well, maybe I didn't go out and accomplish some huge thing in the world. But they did. They raised these children or this family, or they supported their partner or whatever. And, probably touched countless friends and other people along the way. And I know there was another story you wanted to share too, Gigi, of someone who doesn't have kids.
Yeah, a woman who doesn't have kids. And, she's hard on herself often and doesn't see like what she's done. But the truth is she's such an inspiration. She has lived life on the edge. She's, gone out, done adventures, inspired so many people to go out and
moved across the world.
Moved across the world. I mean, she's always going to the next adventure, and her courage is incredible. And she can't see, sitting in her world, the impact of that when other people see and look through their eyes what she's doing. And she's inspired a lot of people to go out and do things that they wouldn't have done without seeing her. And wow. So there's just no way to know the impact that you make every day. But I think the one from the baby's view is a really, really great one, because look at the people around you. And if they said who you are and what you've done for them, that's the story. That's the true story, not the story that you're living in your mind.
Yeah, such a great point there. So that's one practice people can do in terms of looking at their life from someone looking from the outside through the lens of love, and what would you see? And you can do that as a reflection exercise, a writing exercise. And then the other one you talked about a lot today is acknowledgement. So that can be a simple daily practice. And we have many of our clients do this, is to acknowledge themselves every day. Like, what did they really do that worked? Or what did they do that contributed in some way? Or what are they proud of for themselves that day? And it seems so simple and almost silly to people when we suggest it, but when they start doing it, it's powerful. They're like, oh my gosh, right? Or maybe something comes up in them where it's hard for them to acknowledge themselves and they realize that's there for them. But really over time, it becomes kind of like a muscle where it becomes much easier to acknowledge yourself. And that really is starting to kind of turn the tide in the other direction.
Yeah. Yeah. And I always talk to myself like, Gigi, you did so great on that. Yeah. So,
and I guess just to close, what do you feel like is the impact when women start to make this shift, right? So when women,
my gosh,
really stop being so hard on themselves. And we're saying women again, this could be anyone. We just primarily work with women. And so what happens in their lives? Like, why is this important? Because people go like, well, yeah, it's not that big a deal. Right?
It is so important, because what it does is all that time you're sitting there being self-centered, okay, by thinking about yourself, you shift that to putting that into the people you love, into the projects you want to do, into impacting the world, into being present for people. That's the other thing too. When you're always in your head questioning yourself, you're not present in your life. You're not present for your children. You're not present for your clients. You're not present. You're not fully expressing who you are and what you're here to do. And when you shift this and own who you are, then it eliminates so much wasted time. So much wasted time. And you get to feel and enjoy life. That's the other thing too. When you're always questioning yourself, you no longer feel life. All you feel is your mind.
That's a really interesting point. And I love what you said about freeing up all that energy. Like, if you really think about like how much energy does it take, whether it's like the amount of hours in a day you're being hard on yourself, or just how much it drains your energy when you're being hard on yourself. And like, what if you had all that energy back, right? Like, you really could take that, like you're saying, and pour it into the people and the projects and the things that you love, pour it into what you want, instead of kind of cycling in just something that's not serving you.
Yeah. And if you do have children, it's one of the greatest things you could do to teach your children through the action. You'll never teach it to them by telling them. You'll only teach it to them by doing it. And they learn from you as a role model and what they see.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the greatest gifts you can give them.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, Gigi. It was fun to be back with you here.
Yeah, you too.
Okay. All right. Love you. See you soon. Bye, everybody. Bye-bye.
That's our episode for today, but let's not make it the end of our love story. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and think of some women in your life you'd love to share it with. And if you want to learn more about our events and programs, visit wayofthemuse.com. See you next time.